I'm a sovereign citizen, you can't prosecute me. I wish I could use this defense with my student loans. Welcome back to Wine and Chill. I'm Stephanie, your favorite recovering lawyer, and today we are still drinking Maison Noir, black-owned, free Gamay, and today we are going to discuss Darrell Brooks and the rise of sovereign citizens. If you missed the news, the Darrell Brooks trial was splashed all over the news in the recent weeks. Specifically, we are going to discuss the complicated rise of the sovereign citizens. Now, here's our brief agenda. First, we have a background into who is Darrell Brooks, what was his trial about, what exactly did he do? Spoiler alert, it's unpleasant. We usually never cover crim because criminal law raises my blood pressure and our legal system is full of systemic flaws. However, this video is going to focus less on actual criminal law and more on the history and current rise of sovereign citizens. We're going to do a brief overview of the trial, but if you're interested, I highly recommend heading over to the Law and Crime Network as they cover the trial in detail. After we go over the trial, we'll then move on to what are sovereign citizens and what are their origins. We're then going to spend a significant amount of time about Moorish sovereign citizens. Honestly, sovereign citizens should all be in quotes, so we're going to interchange that intermittently. And last but not least, we are going to pour a glass for the public defenders who are tirelessly fighting for everyone in the United States, particularly those that cannot afford to pay. All right, the Darrell Brooks trial. Now, Darrell Brooks, as he stated multiple times during his trial, does not consent to being called Darrell Brooks at this time. That is not changing the fact that on his birth certificate, the man's name is Darrell Brooks. He is a Wisconsin resident and a self-proclaimed sovereign citizen. More on what that actually means in a moment. Days before driving his vehicle into a Wisconsin Christmas parade and thus causing his trial, as well and most importantly, unfortunately, the death of 6 people, he actually used his car to allegedly run over the mother of his child. And I'm adding that for a specific reason because not only does our society, but also our criminal justice system largely ignores victims of intimate partner violence. Allegedly running someone over with your vehicle should be categorized as attempted murder, not second-degree recklessly endangering safety and battery. Battery, oftentimes in intimate partner situations, is pushed to the side and most always deprioritized. Now, onto the case that splashed Darrell Brooks into the spotlight. He was charged with more than 77 counts, including 6 intentional homicide counts, and decided instead of owning up to what he did, he is now convicted, he decided to drag not only the deceased but their families through the mud and through the court proceedings for almost 2 weeks. There is evidence that shows that he drove his vehicle purposely through a Christmas parade. Dozens of witnesses saw him despite his court arguings, and interestingly so, that same vehicle was featured in a music video that he appeared in. If the events couldn't become any more bizarre, after driving his vehicle through the Christmas parade and unfortunately and irreparably harming people, Darrell Brooks then fled, somehow posed himself as an unhoused man, and was allowed to enter a very nice young gentleman's house. The young man even went so far as to make Darrell a sandwich. Moments later, just to realize that Darrell Brooks might be a person of interest. Now, sir, it is good to know that there are kind people still left in this world, but please do not let strangers into your house ever again. This trial received so much attention not only because of the heinous acts that were committed, but because of Darrell's insistence to represent himself and to start the proceedings by stating that he wanted to represent himself pro per, which does not exist in the court of the United States law, and claimed that he was a sovereign citizen.
Is it your desire to represent yourself in this case?
It is. I would like to proceed in this matter prior persona, not pro se.
Say that last part again.
I would like to proceed in this matter in pro per, not pro se.
So you're going to have to tell me what you think that means.
It is me exercising my right to defend myself, to represent myself as a sovereign citizen.
He also then proceeded to waste not only taxpayer dollars, but taxpayer time as he proceeded to act a plumb fool throughout the entire proceedings.
I said that the individual was either black, mixed, or Latino.
So it would be fair to say you didn't know at the time?
I was giving a general description.
So it would be fair to say that you weren't sure?
I was positive it was you.
Who is you?
You. I'm looking at you.
And how did you come to that conclusion, the you conclusion?
I'm looking at you.
And single-handedly raised the judge's blood pressure by at least 100 points.
That's not gonna work either.
Mr. Brooks, you are advised to stop with the commentary.
No, I'm gonna say what I want.
You called this witness. I'm going to take a break right now and excuse the jury and this witness.
That's not fair to the jury. They have a right to hear everything. I'm not finna sit here and let you fix the trial because you don't want to tell the truth to the jury.
Mr. Brooks, please stop.
No, ain't no please.
You are
nothing.
being disruptive.
Ain't
You
no
are being
please.
disrespectful.
You always
The
gonna
witness
find
may
some
step
reason to
down.
say somebody's being disruptive because they want the truth to be out there. Man, quit it. You supposed to be the
Mr.
judge.
Brooks, I'm advising you that continued interruptions will result in you forfeiting your right to be present in this courtroom.
Under what law and
during
fact can you do that?
Illinois versus Allen.
Okay,
sir.
but the fourth option that you made up, that's not even in the law?
Mr.
Because you
Brooks,
can't do that.
I need to make a
By law, you
ruling.
can't do that.
I need to
And
make
you
a
know you
finding.
can't.
All right, I'm going to excuse everyone. Mr. Brooks is being removed from the courtroom.
An anecdotal note about this, lawyers are not even allowed to act the way that he acted in court. Specifically, I interned for a federal judge back when I was in law school, and I used to catch secondhand embarrassment when the judge would seamlessly and ruthlessly ream lawyers out for not entering evidence into court properly. They don't really take too kindly to any of that. They don't take kindly to anybody making any mistakes. They usually don't even take kindly to people questioning them. Most judges do not have the patience or dedication that Judge Darrell clearly showed that she has to preserve the record. The reason why she acted in this manner is most likely to ensure that he does not appeal, stating that he didn't receive a fair trial, because the only people that would hurt is the victims' families by having to suffer through this circus again. All I'm going to say is she's much better than me. Now that we've gone through the background about Darrell Brooks and his case and his now conviction of 77 counts, let's get into what we're really here for. What the heck is a sovereign citizen? Now, the origins of the sovereign citizen movement, it's not really a movement. It's very loose. They don't really know each other, but let's call it that. Will surprise you. The concept of sovereign citizenship actually began with far-right white nationalists, who were adamantly anti-federal government at first, and then overall changed to just adamantly anti-government altogether. The precursor to the sovereign citizenship rise started way back during the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment was passed as a way to begin to make amends for how the United States decided chattel slavery was okay. Keyword as a way to start to make amends. We haven't fully gotten there yet, but that's neither here nor there in this video. The 14th Amendment attempted to rectify these wrongs by granting full citizenship to Black Americans in the United States. Obviously, white supremacists at the time did not like that. And fast forward to the 70s and 80s during desegregation, white supremacists brought it up again, specifically stating, you know what, F that 14th Amendment and F these fake citizens who are less than us under the 14th Amendment. And thus you see the beginning of sovereign citizenship. Now, yes, during the 70s and 80s is actually when you see desegregation, particularly in schools, taking place, even though Brown v. Board of Education was passed in 1954. I'm looking at you, Mississippi, in particular. Not only did racist groups challenge the validity of the 14th Amendment, they stated that the 14th Amendment was actually diluting their white rights, and that new citizens under the 14th Amendment had less rights than them, so they decided to separate themselves. This group in the 80s was largely led by William Gale and his paramilitary, anti-Black, anti-Semitic, anti-everybody who was not an Anglo-Saxon white Protestant Christian like him. And I put that in heavy quotes because it's very unchristian like most of these types of behaviors. He actually preached, and it is recorded, that he fully believed that Anglo-Saxon quote-unquote Protestants were the real descendants of the 12 tribes of Judah. Doesn't this foolishness sound familiar? The sovereign citizen movement had its origin in the Posse Comitatus, Latin for power of the county, a racist far-right movement that evolved in the 1970s. One of the originators of the Posse Comitatus, William Potter Gale, was, as I stated, an anti-Semitic white supremacist obsessed with the purity of white Anglo-Saxon Christians and their supposedly special status as God's chosen people. One of the primary motivations for the creation of the Posse Comitatus was a desire to avoid federal legislation and taxes, keyword on taxes. Racist attitudes informed and complemented these objectives, as adherents wanted to stop the government from collecting taxes to fund programs that would benefit minority communities. marginalized communities forced in poverty, Black people. What's interesting about this, and oddly enough, there are huge sects of quote-unquote sovereign citizens that have adopted this language. Despite the fact that the roots of this concept lie in white supremacy, some Black sovereign citizens have also adopted the tactic of rejecting Fourth Amendment citizenship, sometimes to the consternation of other Black nationalists who recognize the amendment's real historical importance. Self-styled Moorish sovereigns may instead claim birthright of citizenship in a supposed North American Black nation that predates the United States, or in an organization claiming to continue that nation. Have we, the Blacks, finally appropriated something? So first things that the sovereigns altogether believe is that they, using legalese and various grammatical tactics, which we'll discuss in a bit, separate themselves from being a 14th Amendment citizen and instead are just constitutional citizens or citizens of some imaginary land that never existed. I didn't make the rules. Honestly, I don't even think they know who made their rules. That's neither here nor there. Another tenet of their beliefs is that the common law to them is different from what the legal jurisprudence of the United States would consider the common law. Common law in law school is case law, aka things that are litigated in our judicial system. Sovereign citizens don't believe that. Common law to them is anything semi-extending from the Constitution, as they have attached their religious views to the Constitution because they believe former slave owners, aka the founding fathers of this nation, enshrined everything into the Constitution. Anything outside of that is a problem. They don't fully believe in the Constitution either, but you know what? Let's give them a bone. To sovereigns, common law supersedes any regulatory laws, aka laws passed by our legislature. You see why this is going to become problematic. Sovereign citizens, if you haven't already guessed, very much align with state rights. Actually, Mr. Gale, who we mentioned a moment ago, he didn't even really believe in state rights. He wanted county rights. He preached to his followers that only the sheriff in the town you lived in had authority over you. This is because the white nationalist that he was controlled the sheriff. A lot of the sheriffs in some of these towns very much give clanny clan clan, but you already knew that. Sovereign citizens further take it further in their vehement denial that the federal government is real, say that the federal government has been replaced by a corporation. And you know what? I can somehow see how they got to that conclusion, and I blame the politicians for selling us, the regular people, out for literally a low-grade filet mignon from lobbyists. Now, according to sovereign citizens, the vehicle for this change was an 1871 law. They love to quote laws and then misinterpret them, which many sovereigns believe created a United States corporation to govern the District of Columbia under commercial code rather than common law. We do have a commercial code. It's called regulations. We do have a commercial code that exists along with the common law. Subsequently, the United States Code, essentially laws compiled to this point in time, extended this form of corporate rule to the entire country thanks to a provision in Title 28, Section 3002, subsection 15 A, B, C, that includes the phrase United States means a federal corporation. Google searches for this statute overwhelmingly link to sovereign citizen resources far more so than actual historical commentary on the law or the context of this section, which refers to a limited use of the term within a specific chapter of the U.S. Code. They run with things, which is why throughout the trial you saw Darrell Brooks just bringing up fake legalese, but attached to real-life statutes of the law. Now, there has been a large rise in people using sovereign citizen as a defense. To note vehemently, sovereign citizenship is not a defense to any crime or civil proceeding. Essentially, what they have done, aka clog the courts, has been defined as paper terrorism. To prove that they are indeed not 14th Amendment citizens, but constitutional citizens, sovereign citizens go out of their way to file immense amount of paperwork.
Why do you need white man paperwork? Lord have mercy.
They clog up the legal systems with bogus filings, self-representation, and to be quite frank, utter chaos. As this graph shows, sovereign citizen cases by year, April 06 through April 16th. For the year 2016, this is April, so it's only 4 months into the year. You see a rise in cases where the defendant has stated, I'm a sovereign citizen, you can't prosecute me. I wish I could use this defense with my student loans. Truly. The idea of sovereign citizenship may have started with white nationalists, but the face of the sovereign citizenship conglomerate is very much black these days. And this is likely due to the rise and eventual fall of the Nawabian nation. And yes, I said Nawabian, not Nubian, even though they kind of borrowed it. You're about to hear a lot of pseudo-historical borrowed information. I apologize in advance. The Nawabian nation Moors are not to be confused with the actual Moors, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. Just remember the Moors reference for now. Interestingly enough, the Moorish sovereign citizens, aka the black sovereign citizens, they have a very distinctive dedication to grammar and punctuation. They don't always use the grammar and punctuation. However, they believe grammar, punctuation, and capitalization plays a big part in opting out of being a 14th Amendment citizen. In this YouTube comment reply for the win, Dana Gray states, for those of you who don't speak sovereign citizen, there's a reason he seems to be searching for ways to not say I understand. Sovereign citizens believe that by saying I understand, they're actually saying I stand under, and this acknowledging the court's authority over him. He is planning to go to the you can't put me in the jail because I never said the magic word defense. This should be entertaining. I'm trying to hold in my laugh. Just cannot. They are very serious about this, and you're about to see how serious in 0.5 seconds. And commenter Dana Gray is absolutely correct. Sovereign citizens very much believe deep in their spirit that there are magical words that can keep them out of having to follow United States laws. Again, this is farce and malarkey. However, I really wish it applied to my student loans. And let's bring up this Twitter clip that's actually from TikTok that I used the other day in referring to a one notep.
Peace and love, family. It's your boy, Brother Truth. Now, if you know, like I know, when one identifies to be a black, that makes them civilly the mortus under the law. And what is that? Civilly dead in the view of the law, according to the Black's Law Dictionary. And of course, when you look at SF 181 ethnicity form, Black African American is the only race on here that does not stem from original people, right? You just stem from some black crayon color racial group from somewhere out in Africa. Damn. So before you judge this, man, take time to understand a different perspective, a legal perspective, and log on to ourselflawandmaster.com so that you can learn how to assert yourself in law.
Self-law. I overstand. Which, that TikTok rant brings us to redemption theory and emphasis on grammar and capitalization. Brace yourselves. Redemption theory is a theory that sovereign citizens hold in which they very much believe that when they are born, the United States government, the corporation, has made a straw man for their flesh and blood body. As in, they are two separate people. And the straw man is characterized by having the last name written out in capital letters, comma, the first name written out in capital letters. And that straw man has nothing to do with their flesh and blood body. I guess they don't believe in the Dewey Decimal System. We're not going to ask them about that. Maybe somebody should. So, with this belief, debts, tax liens, driver's license, none of that applies to them, and they don't believe in it. That all goes with their straw man or woman or non-binary human being. Although I feel like this group is probably not the most gender inclusive. In the words of a quote-unquote sovereign citizen themselves, my straw man is an artificial person created by law at my birth on September 1st, 1948 via the inscription of an all capital letters name on my birth certificate document, which is a document of title and a negotiable instrument. Remember the negotiable part. My lawful Christian name of birthright was replaced with a legal corporate name of deceit and fraud. I, Thomas Joseph Kennedy, have been answering when the legal person, Kennedy Thomas Joseph, is addressed. Thomas Joseph Kennedy is dead serious. Okay. And therefore, the two have been recognized as being one and the same. When I, Thomas Joseph, Kennedy, the lawful, being distinguished myself as another party than the legal person, the two will be separated. If you're wondering right now if they are being serious, unfortunately, sadly, yes. The answer is yes, in capital letters. Serious as a heart attack. It goes further. Sovereign citizens believe you can borrow money, essentially get money from the straw man, and not pay any of it back. It's giving elaborate scammers. More on Mr. Thomas Joseph Kennedy, Thomas Joseph. In the case of Mr. Thomas Joseph Kennedy, his birth certificate was sold, he claims, to the Canadian Ministry of Industry, Trade, and Commerce. Do not let the Canadians fool you into thinking that only America is full of wackos. So is Canada. Canada's also full of problematic racists as well. Just saying, colonizers will colonize. He claims the Canadian Ministry of Industry and Trade and Commerce at the time of his birth and used as collateral to obtain a loan from the Bank of Canada, which it then invested in stocks and bonds. According to this, Kennedy and anyone else who can emancipate themselves from their straw man can thereby gain control over the money attached to it. To reiterate, in regular English, sovereign citizens believe that when everyone in Canada and the United States is born, the government is taking out stocks against your straw person. And if you are smart enough and use the magical words, you can emancipate yourself, but receive the gains, the dividends that your straw person is due. Child. Ooh, let me drink so I don't laugh. They are also free from the control of the state that, according to redemptionist arguments, is only capable of controlling the actions of straw men and not sovereign persons like Mr. Kennedy. The manner through which the flesh and blood person gains control of the straw man is arcane to say the least, rooted as it is in sovereign citizens' use of pseudo-legal jargon and magical thinking. I'm glad someone else called it magical because this is a wild ride we're on. But in practice, the belief is that the sovereign citizen can issue bills or IOUs against the value of the straw man that are the equivalent of state-backed currencies. Child, I would go so far as to say that if you are Black, you may know a sovereign citizen, or at the very least, you've had a conversation, most likely with one, or you know somebody who's had a conversation with one. And if not, here you go. You now know me through our parasocial relationship. And yes, unfortunately, I have been the victim of getting cornered and hearing sovereign citizen nonsense. And quick anecdotal note, a few years ago during homecoming, I was willingly taking a car ride. As you know, everyone pile in, we're going to tailgate. Of course, why would we all take separate cars? To which, unbeknownst to me, a sovereign citizen was also in the vehicle. A friend of a friend of a friend. Yeah. For approximately 37 minutes, I sat there bewildered, listening to this otherwise very nice human being explain why they were a sovereign citizen and why I too, as a lawyer, should really know more about the law and thus claim my own sovereign citizenship and emancipate myself from the 14th Amendment. Needless to say, at an early time in the day, I had not consumed enough wine to hide the utter shock and confusion as to how I was hearing this. Now, to make this even stranger, there are multiple schools of thought, if we can call them that, specifically relating to Black sovereign citizens. The one that I encountered specifically, there is a group of Black sovereign citizens that believe sovereign citizenship is the way to reparations and that actually Black Americans have been granted reparations. Yes, you heard that correctly. And if you know how to use capitalization and punctuation and grammar to your benefit, you too can get the money gained from your straw man. I feel like Harriet didn't escape for this. Like this is levels of wild to me. And for that, to be honest, I don't really blame the sovereign citizens that specifically believe that part. I blame the US government for not honoring the 40 acres and a mule due to Black Americans years ago, and an issue that can still be rectified today. And Charles, I'm coming for my reparations from you and your pudgy fingers the same way I came for Lizzie. You better hide the crown jewels whilst you can. And I mean that in a joking manner. I'm obviously not popping up to Buckingham, just in case, child. But I will be on these internet streets loudly proclaiming that global reparations for Black people worldwide is highly needed. Alternatively, there are other Black sovereign citizens that incorrectly believe that Black people in this country are the original people from this country, hence their fake separate country they believe in with citizenship. I just rebuke that level of foolery and indigenous erasure. And a third conflated set aligned with, or at least tried to align with, the Moorish Science Temple of America, Inc. To which the Moorish Temple swiftly said, to hell with y'all. Moorish Science Temple of America, Inc. is in no form or fashion a sovereign citizen movement or a tax protester movement. Consequently, our teachings are diametrically opposed to that ideology. The Holy Prophet Noble Drew Ali did not establish the Moorish Science Temple of America for its members to become anarchists or conspiracy theorists. To be noted, they have their own set of issues, the Moorish Temple, which we're not about to get into in this video. And the level of research and bewilderment to do this video, wild, wild. Now, those Moors in the Moorish Temple, the Moors sovereign citizens, the Moorish sovereign citizens, all of that is not to be confused with the Moors of North Africa that actually inhabited, invaded, and ruled over Spain during the 8th to 15th century. A few weeks ago, I confess my deepest problematic love of period pieces, and when I tell you, I would be lying if I didn't take this time to say I would love to see period pieces of that specific time. And while I'm vehemently anti-monarchist, again, to hell with pudgy finger Charles and Lizzie's gone, I too clearly have work to do on my socialism and collective economics journey. Socialism ain't through with me yet, and that quiet longing to see Black people venerated, beloved, and adorned in the finest fashions is actually a central tenet in Hotep ideology. A tenet, of course, pushed aside for ahistorical retellings of history, misogyny, homophobia, transphobia, and occasional sea moss scams, sales. If you ever see a light-skinned woman with a head wrap on, there's a high probability that she's trying to sell you sea moss. I have to pay my student loan somehow. But seriously, the word Hotep, which is actually an ancient Egyptian word, which is potentially related to the idea of modern day peace, and is allegedly originated from the word peace. And since Hoteps are not exactly peaceful with their widespread conspiracy theories, I will reclaim the word for us and refer to them as Noteps throughout the rest of the video. And a disclaimer, if you disagree with my categorization of your fellow sea moss pushers, reference back to the original meaning of Hotep, and know that writing a 10-page paragraph dissertation angry gremlin comment is neither peaceful nor a productive use of your time. I'll give one thing and one thing alone to the Noteps. They have an instinct dedication to the aesthetic of Afrocentrism. And you know what? I too appreciate that. To paraphrase Kimberly Foster paraphrasing somebody else, the gold is in our soul. Culturally, throughout the diaspora, Black people have generally always loved gold and colorful clothing and colorful adoration. Not simply because gold looks good on our skin, it's culturally a homage to the beautiful culture and aesthetic that we are stolen from. And that white supremacy has fought very hard in this continent to malign, erase, and if that fails, simply appropriate and claim as their own. Which brings us back to the Nubian Moors and a one Dwight York, who, to paraphrase what I'm about to say, is a convicted Notep scammer. And that is the least of the bad things that he did. Trigger warning. Dwight York is an infamous and now jailed cult leader of the Nubians. He began gathering a following after being convicted of, it's on the screen, a 13-year-old girl in New York. Important, and it's getting noted in the beginning of this retelling of his history, because that pattern of behavior is going to resurface and eventually be his demise. The group's first name was Ansar Puri Sufi. Then in the 1970s, they moved to Brooklyn and took the name Ansura Allah Community, and Dwight York took the name Dr. Malachi York. Throughout the 1970s and 1980s, the AAC expanded greatly. York eventually had 500 people living in about 20 apartment buildings that he owned in the Bushwick district of Brooklyn. Yes, Black and brown people used to live in Bushwick. The Puerto Ricans are still holding out in Bushwick and sadly, Bushwick is being rapidly gentrified. The AAC operated bookstores, gift shops, a clothing store, and a grocery store. AAC chapters were founded in several other U.S. cities and abroad in Trinidad, London, and Toronto. One thing about the diaspora, we gonna get conned together, child. AAC members in Brooklyn were asked to surrender all of their possessions, live in York's barrack-style apartments, and work for free. That is how he amassed all this money. There would later be conspiracy theories as to how the government took all of this from him because it was ill-gotten gains. Many were given a daily quota of $25 to $100, which they had to reach by begging or selling literature. Those who did not meet their quotas were beaten or otherwise disciplined. Like York's name, the group's name and ideologies constantly changes. At one point, they were Moorish and they believed in some sort of Islamic, pseudo-Islamic faith. I say pseudo because they weren't very adherent. They then had Moorish beliefs. They had sovereign citizen beliefs. They kept the sovereign citizen beliefs because they wanted to skirt paying taxes and the law in general. To most wildly, even believing York when he claimed to be a UFO, God, sent from another planet. Do not victim blame. I'm speaking to you and to me. But seriously, on a serious note, once people enter into cults, usually they enter in during semi-normal phases. Oh, this is somebody who is charismatic. This person is replacing a need I have in my life. Maybe they are acting as a parental figure. And I know this, and I'm speaking from a general conversation I had with one of you about Dwight York and your interactions with Dwight York. So thank you so much for that. York was also known to have sadly impregnated many of his followers, many of which were young girls. If this sounds familiar, maybe you watched the documentary on Netflix about Warren Jeffs, which is eerily almost the same, except Warren Jeffs is a white Mormon fundamentalist. Other than that, I can't tell the difference between the two of them. Now, remember, this began in the 70s. Almost 20 years later, in 1993, York moved his adherents to rural Georgia and decided to build a giant compound, as seen in these pictures, for his adherents. Specifically rural Georgia, so there were less prying eyes looking at what he was doing and who he was conning. Insert Tama Ray. With the help of Jacob York, one of Dwight's many children, Dwight York was brought to justice and convicted on 10 federal counts of racketeering, child endangerment, Jacob York, one of Dwight's oldest sons, learned about his father's Tama Ray compound around 1998. He had left the cult in 1990. Troubled by the news, he went to Georgia to confront his father. According to Jacob, Dwight told him, "I don't believe in any of this shit. If I had to dress up like a nun, if I had to be a Jew, I'd do it for this type of money." Jacob worked to build the case against Dwight by helping Sheriff Sills find and interview victims of his father's abuse. These types of people don't believe in religion. These types of people do not care that they're preying on others. These types of people are essentially egotistical, maniacal scammers. Now, to bring it back to the spread of the ideology of Moorish or Black sovereign citizens, once the Tama Ray compound was dismembered, the adherents as well as the victims were dispersed, the land was sold, and those adherents then spread the tenets of sovereign citizens to the places they went to. To note, the county then came in, removed all of the structures, and resold the land. I wouldn't want to live on land where so much pain, violence, and evilness occurred, personally. But then again, that's large swaths, if not all, of America. Another video for another day. Not to simply fade into the dark after his over 100-year sentence, in 2018, Dwight York sued several federal government agencies for $2 billion. Yes, you're hearing this correctly. $2 billion, stating in his 3-page complaint, "I am not or never have been part of this corporate state or their judicial system. The reason I am asking for the amount of money damages is because I think a message should be sent to everyone in North America that you should not murder, pillage, or do treason, sedition, involuntary servitude, slavery, terrorism, fraud, extortion, grand theft, robbery, conspiracy, and racketeering against a Native American Moor." The irony in his statement is wild, because that's quite literally all the things that he's convicted of doing to other human beings. Yeah. This is one of the first videos in a long time that we're drinking the entire glass of wine. And not to give one group credit for what is a large, disorganized group project where everyone literally gets a failing grade, the sovereign citizen defense is likely on the rise because it is spreading throughout prison populations where people, rightfully or wrongfully convicted of exorbitant amounts of times, have literally nothing to lose. If I'm facing 20 years, best believe I'm gonna try all the things. It's almost as if fixing the discrepancies and inequalities in our legal system and our justice system would simultaneously, maybe, most likely, fix at least some of the issues arising from the sovereign citizen movement. Which brings me to who bears some of the heaviest burdens in our current judicial system: public defenders. Public defenders enter the legal profession with one of the largest tasks assigned to any lawyer in the United States. They are tasked with defending those who cannot afford legal counsel, essentially those who are systemically disenfranchised and living in forced poverty. The role of a public defender is to ensure, even if you do not have the ability to pay, your legal rights are not violated and that you do receive the best counsel possible, and to ensure that people receive equal protection under the law. However, the reality is that public defenders are often and purposefully underpaid and forced to take on large caseloads where living up to that needed standard is often unattainable and impossible. The average salary for public defenders, as you see on the screen, varies greatly depending on what city you live in, but as you also see on the screen, is definitely not a living wage. Particularly $48,000, $50,000, who can feed a family on that amount? In New York City specifically, there has been a 73% increase in the legal aid's attrition rate. Legal aid is the largest provider in the city for public defenders. They have lost in the past year alone 10% of the staff, which is approximately about 200 people, largely due to the fact that people are saying it is untenable to live in their current situation with their low pay and high caseload. We are choosing between a decent life and representing low-income clients and making sure that justice is served, said Asuta Berry, a housing lawyer with legal aid. Ms. Berry, 34, was always drawn to public interest work. Growing up in Brooklyn's Flatbush neighborhood, she saw the impacts of gentrification firsthand, but she makes $83,000 a year, is helping to support three other relatives who live with her, and still owes more than $150,000 in student loans. She has to pick up a second job teaching to keep up with her expenses. "I'm really afraid for what my rent will look like soon," she said. "It's an untenable situation right now." Separately and relatedly, if you want to see a full breakdown as to why Biden's current student loan relief is a good start but not enough for the Black community, I highly recommend the live I did last month or the month before. While the sovereign citizen defense is less a movement and more a last-ditch effort by those rightfully or wrongfully caught in our legal system's web, this grouping of individuals does raise a valid question. We have a legal system that purposely disenfranchises poor people of all races, specifically targets Black and Latin people, particularly those that are indigent, and then overworks the very public defenders who have made it their life's mission to help everyone. Overworks them and underpays them so much so that to fight back against the system seems almost insurmountable. If we want so-called sovereign citizens to believe in the legitimacy of our legal system, shouldn't our justice system begin to address the well-documented injustices first? Well, if you haven't already, go ahead and like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments, if you've met a sovereign citizen, how did that interaction go? All right, I'll catch you on the next video. Oh, we drank it all. It's a shame. You should never waste wine.